But Ben, you've got more on Starmer.
Absolutely, and you are absolutely correct, Mike. He is going for the top job, so he does require special scrutiny. And let's let him tell us what his plans for the country are, and in particular, what the most important mission is facing the UK.
The most important mission, bar none, is economic growth. I see you as the engines for change.
Today we're here to talk about how we as mayors can focus on growth. We're already doing it, the incumbents, growing our economy faster than other places in the country. We know that devolution works.
It's an absolute privilege to be here, part of this group, working with Labour, making the difference. The Labour mayors working with Labour government can give, certainly people in this region, for the first time in a generation, hope that their lives can be better, hope that their families have a better future here, and hope that the places where they live have a better future too.
We need to build from the foundations of create good, quality, local jobs that really matter to people, to get control of our public transport and to train the childcare workers so that people can overcome those barriers to getting into work.
The engine room of national renewal is around this table. Our task is to rebuild our economy from the ground up, and that can only be done with leaders like you.
That was delightful.
Wasn't it just? Yes, the engine room of national growth. They're going to rebuild the economic system from the ground up. There's nothing more hilarious than politicians talking about economic growth. Not a single one of the people in that film have created a single viable job in their entire careers, and they're not going to at any point in the future. I can promise you that. But they've been engaging in the economic discussion, and this week, a bunch of those people, that was the Metro mayors and Keir Starmer, a bunch of the Metro mayors have descended on Leeds for this event, which is UKREiiF, the Real Estate Investment and Infrastructure Forum. And they are helping to build back better. Actually still says that on their LinkedIn page, right? And build back better is obviously the World Economic Forum mantra that I thought most people had abandoned around 2022 because we worked out what it meant, but they're still at it up in Leeds. It's a big exhibition and a public-private marketplace, ultimately, for new technologies in energy and infrastructure. A bunch of the mayors were there, so you can see here, these are a few of the people that were in that video. Steve Rotherham from Liverpool, Tracy Brabin, the mayor of West Yorkshire up front there, taking a selfie, doing the major work of current 21st century politician, taking pictures for social media. You've also got Oliver Coppard from South Yorkshire, Richard Parker, the new mayor of the West Midlands, and Angela Rayner there, Shadow Secretary for Levelling Up at the back. Andy Burnham was also floating around, mayor of Greater Manchester, and Rory Stewart, who Mike has already talked about. He was there too, and I actually don't think that he's ever been to the north of England before. This is the kind of gentleman that gets a bit of vertigo if he goes north of the Watford Gap. So anyway, he made a special effort to get there. And as I said, this is a public-private marketplace, right? So this is about introducing investors and developers to mayors who are ultimately going to be funding this new energy system, this new economic system that we're going to build from the ground up, right? And as we've spoken about a lot, and we'll continue to speak about, this kind of public-private marketplace is fascist. This is a fascist system. And it's predicated really on the wholesale demolition of existing cities, especially existing industrial capacity, which is ultimately where economic growth comes from, right? So you've got these people talking about growth. They want to use taxes to fund growth. That doesn't make any sense. And in the process of doing what we're planning to do, we're going to destroy the actual source of growth. Try and make sense of that. You can't. It's completely contradictory. And so this is about construction, but it's also very much about transportation. So actually, you would have seen that video with Starmer in at the start was held in a bus station. So this is about the transportation systems, public transport, driving towards zero carbon technologies, smart grids, ultimately 15-minute cities, the whole shebang as put forward by the World Economic Forum. And it is being fully backed by the cabinet, or the shadow cabinet, certainly, as they still are at this moment in time. So this is Angela Rayner, the shadow secretary for Levelling Up, basically standing there and giving the full formal front bench stamp of approval to proceedings. This is what we're going to do. This is where growth's going to come from. Regional mayors borrowing money from private investors to purchase services from private sector companies in a fascist marketplace, which will leave our cities looking like this, right? So this is the REiiF site up in Leeds. This is the Creative Quarter, right? This doesn't look like a northern city. That is not actually what Leeds is like, right? It's just some little bubble that they've created with these identikit buildings. You could be anywhere in Europe. You could be anywhere in the world, really. Like, there's absolutely no flavour, no local personality to this. And all of it, particularly the electric stuff, the net zero stuff, it's built on really, really dodgy technology, right? So we know that it's predicated on the use of slave labour. This is a cobalt mine in the Congo. There are over 40,000 child slaves working in appalling conditions to mine the raw materials for this smart grid that we're being told that we need to move over to. And actually, this is a big geopolitical issue because just this last week, there was an attempted coup in the Congo, right? So this was actually entertainingly perpetrated, or they attempted to carry out a coup. One of the people involved was this fella, Benjamin Rubin. No relation, but I thought that was quite funny to see my own name pop up, slightly different spelling. And a lot of this is being coordinated by, or it certainly has been suggested it's being coordinated by this fella, Dan Gertler, who is an Israeli billionaire who runs many of these mines, alongside a lot of Chinese mining companies as well. Yeah, so Labour economic policy, the engine of growth, this big transition that they're saying that they're going to invest in, is predicated on the use of slave labour, and ultimately it's just another form of Western imperialism. Right? That's what's being offered here. And how they're going to get us to go along to it and pay for it? Well, let's have a little look at what's been going on in Hackney.
In London, it's an urban setting, it's overpopulated, so the impact of heat is much bigger.
2022, the 40-degree heat wave across London, that was putting a huge amount of pressure and resources on an already stretched NHS.
The most vulnerable people are the ones who work outside, homeless people, single parents who have less means, people who are elderly.
I found it very, very uncomfortable. I nearly passed out a couple of times.
When the weather is too hot, I'm short of breath. So you can imagine how it affects people who are older than me.
So the question is how can we work together to minimise that harm, to help our population stay fit and healthy, to cope with that heat.
The council, they have a lot of part to play, and we, the community, have a lot to play as well. People should be educated. Tell people what to do in case of this emergency.
How prepared we are in London is a big question mark. So it's a great avenue to start this conversation and start acting on it.
Democratic innovation, sortition, basically railroading the public into agreeing to signing up to these new technologies, all handed down from the Economic Forum and the UN, a wholesale transition of our society, a new energy system, untested technologies, destruction of existing cities and industrial capacity, using experimental technologies paid for with taxpayer money in a deeply compromised public-private marketplace, all predicated on the use of slave labour in Africa to ultimately benefit the Chinese mining companies and an Israeli billionaire who may have just tried to carry out a military coup, all with the blessing of Labour leadership. You really couldn't make this stuff up.
Yeah, a little later in the programme, we'll be talking about the national grid. And so we'll have more to say on that in a second, more public-private partnerships on the way.